Good morning, good morning. Good to be with you again. Sorry I'm kind of late on the video today, but my birthday was Wednesday, and I'm just finally recuperating. Had a wonderful time with my birthday, but we left off with, and we're on unconditional love. It's one of the most important, sorry, at work I cut my finger, but we're on one of the most important subjects that we could ever possibly talk about, and it's unconditional love. It's something that affects every area of our lives. We have to realize and accept this and work on learning how to give unconditional love. We left off with if God were to come back today in the form of Jesus on earth to prove that he was real, why wouldn't he do it? Why couldn't he do it? And my answer was, are you kidding? Do you remember what happened to him last time when he came? If it were me, there was no way in the world I would come back to this place after the hell you took me through the first time. Have any of you seen The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson? It's a good movie. If it were up to me in any church I had, right around time it would come time for communion, I would show that picture, Passion of the Christ, because that picture is so interesting. It's so important to see how much Christ loved us. When they yanked his beard, it was showing Christ had a full beard. And this is in his real life. He had a full beard. And when they yanked, they didn't just yank like you just tug, like the little beard here. I just tug a little. It wasn't like that. They yanked chunks of his beard with part of his skin out, part of his flesh. And any of you ever heard of a cat of nine tails? It's a whip with a handle, and it's got 9 separate whips that come out of it. Each one of those whips had broken bone and chunks of glass in it, so that when they hit him, they snatched chunks of skin out of his body. They snatched chunks of skin out of his body, so much so that people could actually see bone, literal bone, and vital organs. They say that by the time Jesus was pronounced dead, his body and face were so swollen and torn until if his mother had not been there, she would not have recognized him. Yeah, he was completely he was so swollen and torn, and the chunks was taken out of him. So, but I want to, excuse me a moment. But I want to tell you this. God is God. God is omnipotent, which means all-powerful. He is omniscient, which means all-seeing, and he is omnipresent, which means he's everywhere at the same time. God could have stopped all of this pain, agony, and misery at any time. He so chose to. But because he loved us so much, because he knew that if he did not go through with it, you and I would not be here today, God took all of that pain and suffering as a human being. He took it all. He didn't have to. He was God in the flesh. Remember the word Emmanuel, God with us? And for all of you doubters and naysayers who wanted to know why Jesus used the phrase "is my Father," well, he was just a part of the whole. He wasn't the whole. He was just a part of the whole. God reached into his spirit being, and took a puff or just a fraction of himself and put it into flesh, because God is all and in all. So when Jesus refers to my Father being higher than me, or it's pretty common sense. He was referring to the whole that he was just part of. And to go on, let's turn to John 15, verses 12 through 17. Chapter 15, the book of John, chapter 15, verses 12 through 17. And it says, This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Wow. It's finished. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. 14. You are my friends if you do what I command you. 15. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. 16. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. 17. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. Love one another as I have loved you. Wow. Chew on that for a bit, my friends. It's all about the love. Unconditional love. Christ said, loved one another as I have loved you. How did he love us? And I quote, wherein while we were yet sinners, Christ got slapped, Christ got his beard yanked, Christ got chunks of his body snatched out of him, Christ was hung on the cross while we were still getting high, lying, cheating, stealing, robbing, and doing everything that we were doing that was wrong. Christ died for us unconditionally. He didn't wait for us to change. He didn't say, you know what? This is a hard, stiff-necked people. They're not going to change. They're not even trying. I'm not going to hurt myself for them. He didn't do that. He didn't say that. He died for us. Now, this love of God gives us our greatest example of unconditional love. Excuse me. While we were still sinners, Christ/God died for us. This also gives us a glimpse into who God is today. He didn't wait on us to change. John 15 verse 12. Love one another as I have loved you. Now this is a commandment. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, soul, strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. This is a commandment. So how do we perform this unconditional love? How did Jesus, God, love us? This question takes us back to Romans chapter 5 and verse 8. But God showed his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died. That's called unconditional. In the Greek, the word is agapeo, agape, without condition, the God kind of love. Well, what is the God kind of love? For this, we go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and start at verse 1. This chapter is called the love chapter for a very good reason, as you shall soon see. The book of 1 Corinthians, and we're going to chapter 13. And we're going to start at verse 1. And it says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. 2. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. 3. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. 4. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. 5. Or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. 6. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. 7. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. 8. Love never ends. And then we drop down to verse 13. So now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. Check that out. I love this. Now, what we want to do is we want to focus on verse 4. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. These are the attributes of unconditional love. This is how we are supposed to love our neighbors, our friends, our girl or boyfriends, our wives, husbands, and yes, even our enemies. Turn to the book of Matthew in chapter 5. You're going back from Corinthians. Remember, the first book of the New Testament is Matthew. Matthew, the book of Matthew in chapter 5. And we're going to read verses 43 through 48. Starting at 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Not prosecute, persecute. Verse 45, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than other people? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Okay, first thing I want to do is focus on that word perfect. It means grown up, mature in the Greek. A lot of people mistake that to mean sinless. No such possibility. Studying your scriptures, you'll see there's no such possibility whatever to be sinless. Because of Adam and Eve in the beginning, we're all born and raised in sin. And you can find it in your thoughts, in your sleep, when you dream. Sinless is impossible. So what does this mean for me? It means that even if you speak to a person this morning and they bark at you, you speak to that same person tomorrow. It means that if you see Joe or Sue with $1,000, ask them for $5 and they tell you to get out of their face. If you see them that night and they have been robbed and need $10, if you have it, your duty is to give it to them. It means you do not have the right to expect your neighbor, friend, boyfriend, girlfriend to be a certain way. It means that you don't go into a relationship expecting to change or remake anyone. Changing your partner is up to God and them. You have a right to pray for change or even suggest change in a relationship, but you don't have the option of hating a person because they don't or won't change. When you love someone because they are fine, sexy, skinny, big bone, have a big butt, built, a hump, muscular, they like what you like, they cook good, make love good. When you love someone because there are some things about them you like, then you have just drawn up a business deal or fallen in lust, but not love. That is why so many relationships do not last. People don't know the difference anymore from lust, like, and love. There's a difference between signing a business contract. I love you because. The only clause, the only additive to that should be, I love you because you are God's creation. Because God brought you into my life. Because God brought us together. That and that alone is the only reason we should love. If people love you, let me give you a good example. The first time I was married, When I married my wife, I was selling drugs. I had a lot of women friends. I hung out at clubs, and I hung with my homeboys. Well, I told my future wife, look, this is who I am. This is how you met me. If you want me, this is what you get. Take me the way I am. And when we got married, I still hung out at my clubs. I still hung with my homeboys. I still sold drugs. And I spent very little time with her. But as the months and the years went on, I began to realize that when I came home, food was ready. She was ready to make love, not sex, mind you. The house was clean. She greeted me eagerly with a kiss and a hug. And I began to realize, hey, this woman loves me, not just loves me. And one night I was at the club, and it was like about 8 or 9 o'clock. The club really had just opened. And I told my friends, you know what? I'm going home. And of course, they, oh, you're whipped. She's got you whipped. She's got you trained already. You just got together and you're trained. And I told them, I was like, well, which one of you are going to sleep with me? And then, oh, no, you're crazy, man. Ain't nobody going to sleep. I said, well, who's going to clean my house? Oh, man, ain't nobody going to come clean your house. You a grown man. I said, well, who's going to cook for me? And when they got silent, I was like, okay, see what I mean? I'll see you later. And I went home to my wife. A couple of days later, I only had like $25 in my pocket, and I stopped by a store on my way home. And when I stopped by the store, I saw a little trinket, a little necklace. It was cheap, but I wanted to show, for some weird reason, I wanted to show my wife at that time that I appreciated her. So I took 20 of the $25 I had, and I went and got her that little trinket. I said this to say that this is the way that people change. You can't change them by making them change or trying to be in control of their lives or forcing them. Just like with our love for God, we change because we love someone. They change because they love us. And this is the way the relationship has to be. You be you, and let the God in you show. And they will change because you've let the God in you show. Not because you forced them to. Not because you were in control. Not because you trained them. The only reason you should fall for anyone is because they are God's creation. No one has to earn your love. You did not, could not, will never be able to earn God's love. Yet we tend to think and act like we are more important than God. People have to earn our love. This is one of the reasons why we set ourselves up for failure in our relationships today. In many areas of our lives and minds, we set ourselves up to be bigger than God without even thinking about it. Check out this story in the book of Matthew in chapter 18. And we're already in Matthew, so just turn to chapter 18, starting at verse 21. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? And Jesus said, as many as 7 times. 22. No, let me read that again. I'm sorry. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? 22. And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. 24. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. 27. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. 28. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seeing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay what you owe. 29. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will pay you. 30. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. 31. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. 32. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. 33. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? 34. And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. 35. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. Okay, the whole purpose of this story is to help us to understand how Jesus forgave us our sins and was willing to die for us before we ever changed. And we can go out and we can't forgive others? Explain that to me. Okay, let's go through this story. The king is God. We are the ones who owe God 10,000 or 6 billion talents. And the everyday people we meet in our daily lives, they are the ones who owed the 100 denarii or the $12,000. Now stop and think for a moment about all that we owe God. All that he has forgiven us of. While thinking about this, remember that he did not wait for us to change before he loved us. Do you feel like someone owes you respect? Christ didn't feel like you owed him anything before he gave his life for you. You see, we begin to recognize God's unconditional love in our lives, his love for us, and he doesn't force us to change or expect us to. We change because we begin to realize just how much he has loved us. How in the heck do you expect me to love like this? It's impossible. Guess what? It's not impossible. I don't expect you to live like that. And you're right, it is impossible. God does not expect you to love of others this way either. That is why Christ in you will do it. You only have to relax and allow him to work in and through you. The book of Colossians chapter 1 and verses 27 through 29 tells us everything we need to know. And we will touch on that in our next series, our next part of this series. Have a blessed one. Peace out.